The year is 1940. The Nazi war machine is triumphant across the continent. London burns under the Blitz. The United Kingdom stands alone, clinging to existence, facing the total military might of Nazi Germany. But defiance cannot survive on courage alone. It needs fuel, it needs food, it needs steel, munitions, and aircraft. And all of it, every single gallon and every single bolt, must cross the deadliest stretch of water on Earth, the North Atlantic. This was the Battle of the Atlantic, a relentless existential struggle. Germany's U-boats and surface raiders deployed by Admiral Raeder hunted in packs, aiming to sever Britain's vital maritime lifeline. This wasn't merely a campaign, it was a strategy of strangulation. If the U-boats and raiders succeeded, Britain would starve, its war industries would grind to a halt, and the war would be lost without a single German boot setting foot on English soil. The stakes were absolute. To combat this, convoys became the answer. Dozens of merchant ships laden with precious cargo would gather, forming a floating city, hoping that safety in numbers, along with sophisticated evasion tactics, would offer protection. But the sheer vastness of the Atlantic, particularly the black pit beyond the range of coastal air cover, meant dedicated naval escorts were essential. Yet the Royal Navy was stretched to the breaking point. Destroyers, corvettes, frigates, every available modern warship was committed. This left Britain perilously short of protection for its merchant fleet. To bridge this massive gap, an unlikely makeshift fleet was pressed into service, the Armed Merchant Cruisers, or AMCs. These were once proud passenger liners, the Aquitania, the Queen Mary, symbols of peacetime luxury and transatlantic elegance. Now, stripped of their fine fittings, painted a stark battleship gray, and armed with hastily mounted, often shockingly antiquated guns, they were thrown into the crucible of war. They were stopgaps, never truly designed for naval combat. Their primary role was intended to be anti-raider patrols or sub-chasing, using their speed to overtake slower, smaller adversaries. But they were warships in name only. They possessed the speed of a moderate freighter, the armor of a cruise liner, which is to say virtually none, and their armament was almost universally obsolete. One such ship was HMS Jervis Bay, and her commander, a quiet, meticulous man named Captain Edward Stephen Fogarty Fegan. Fegan, a veteran naval officer, knew his ship's limitations better than anyone. She carried 7 6-inch guns, relics of the First World War with exposed crews and rudimentary mechanical fire control. They were slow to reload and possessed a maximum effective range that would prove tragically inadequate. Her top speed offered little hope of escape from a modern predator, but she was the only escort available. On October 28, 1940, convoy HX-84 began to assemble in Halifax, Nova Scotia. 38 merchant vessels, a vast procession of tankers, freighters, and cargo ships, loaded with over 300,000 tons of desperately needed supplies. The cargo included grain, lumber, steel, and a particularly vital consignment of aviation fuel and crated aircraft. This was Britain's arsenal, their sole escort for the perilous journey across the mid-Atlantic, HMS Jervis Bay. As the convoy steamed eastward, its men focused on the constant watch for the telltale wake of a periscope. No one, however, could have truly grasped the magnitude of the horror that lay ahead. They were steaming directly into the path of one of Nazi Germany's most powerful and sophisticated surface raiders. While convoy HX-84 was slowly making its way east, the vast ocean was concealing a hunter of exceptional deadliness. This was the Admiral Scheer, known in the Admiralty as a pocket battleship or Panzerschiff. Completed in 1934, she was a marvel of naval architecture, packing the firepower of a true battleship onto a cruiser displacement. She was designed specifically for commerce raiding, fast enough to evade battleships, and powerful enough to destroy any cruiser. A comparative analysis shows the sheer terror Fegan faced. The Jervis Bay's 6-inch shells weighed 100 pounds. The Admiral Scheer's 6 massive 11-inch guns housed in 2 triple turrets fired armor-piercing shells weighing 671 pounds each. In one salvo, the Scheer delivered 4,026 pounds of ordnance. The Jervis Bay's entire maximum broadside weighed just 700 pounds. Furthermore, the Scheer could open fire accurately from over 20,000 yards, a distance where the Jervis Bay's smaller, less powerful guns could not even graze the enemy's heavy armor. The mismatch was not merely quantitative, it was absolute. The Admiral Scheer, commanded by Captain Theodore Kranke, was on a mission designated Operation Mars. Having slipped through the Denmark Strait, she was operating deep in the Atlantic, an undetected specter of destruction. She was the absolute worst possible foe for an AMC. Then came November 5th, 1940. The weather that afternoon was dismal. Low cloud cover, a gray sea, and a stiff Atlantic chop. A typical day for the convoy until approximately 4:45 p.m. A lookout aboard the freighter Rangatiki sighted a plume of smoke, then a distinct heavy silhouette on the horizon. Not a U-boat, but a powerful warship. The alarm was immediately raised, and the frantic radio calls went out, quickly relaying the terrifying visual description back to the escort. On the bridge of the Jervis Bay, Captain Fagan stared through his binoculars. His training and experience immediately confirmed the devastating truth. This was not a German auxiliary cruiser or an older, less powerful vessel. This was a warship of immense, overpowering strength, the Admiral Scheer. The nightmare scenario had materialized in full view. Fagan was a career officer. He understood naval protocol, and more importantly, he understood the fundamental calculus of the situation. The Jervis Bay was not a fighting ship. She was a deterrent. She had failed to deter. Now she was a shield. His ship would be obliterated within minutes, but his duty was not to his ship. His duty was to the convoy. His duty was to the 38 merchant ships, their crews, and the essential supplies they carried. Without hesitation, he issued the prearranged signal. "Scatter," he commanded. "Scatter the convoy. Execute Plan X." The merchant ships, recognizing the danger flags hoisted by the Jervis Bay, immediately began to break formation, scattering in various directions, desperately increasing speed, and hoping to use the darkening evening as cover. And then Captain Fagan made the choice that defined him. He chose not to flee, not to evade, but to engage. He turned the Jervis Bay's bow directly towards the approaching German behemoth. Captain Fagan ordered maximum speed, knowing his 15-knot liner was still pitifully slow compared to the Scheer. He deployed smoke floats, creating a meager screen to obscure the rapidly dispersing merchant fleet. His final radio signal to the Admiralty went out, confirming the nature of his encounter and his impending action. Jervis Bay to Whitehall, WT, one enemy battleship bearing 328, distance 12 miles, course 208. It was a formal declaration of a doomed last stand. On board the Admiral Scheer, Captain Kranke was reportedly astonished. This small, lightly armed escort was deliberately charging him. It was an act of audacious, suicidal defiance that he was determined to punish swiftly. To Kranke, the escort was a momentary, annoying distraction to be eliminated before he turned his 11-inch guns onto the easy targets, the laden merchant vessels. The Admiral Scheer's guns opened fire at extreme, calculated range, approximately 18,000 yards. The first colossal shells screamed across the vast distance, landing with terrifying accuracy. The Jervis Bay valiantly responded with her own 6-inch guns, but her shells fell utterly harmlessly into the ocean, miles short of their target. The futility of the return fire only underscored the bravery of the men manning the exposed gun decks. The German gunnery, delivered by advanced optical rangefinders and fire control systems, was relentlessly precise. The fifth salvo struck home with devastating effect, tearing into the Jervis Bay's bridge. Shrapnel sighed through the exposed structure. Captain Fagan, standing resolutely on the bridge, was instantly grievously wounded, his right arm shattered. Fire control was destroyed, communications severed. Yet, through sheer force of will, he remained standing, directing his crippled ship forward. He was determined to close the range, to draw the German fire away from the scattering ships until his ship sank beneath him. The Jervis Bay was instantly transformed into a blazing inferno, absorbing the full, brutal fury of the 11-inch guns. The crew fought on with a magnificent, defiant determination. They rushed to load the manually operated guns, to fight the raging fires, to tend to the wounded. The ship was a mangled, burning wreck, listing sharply, but her remaining guns continued to fire. They were buying minutes, then seconds, precious seconds that meant the difference between life and death for the entire convoy. Every direct hit on the Jervis Bay was a conscious decision by Captain Kranke to expend time on the decoy. Each explosion that ripped through the brave AMC was a reprieve for the scattering merchantmen. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, the vital element of falling dusk was coming into play, offering the critical low visibility cover that the freighters needed to vanish. For approximately 22 minutes, HMS Jervis Bay endured the relentless pounding. She absorbed everything the Admiral Scheer could throw at her. Her small guns continued to spit defiance even as the ship settled lower in the water. Finally, another direct hit, a massive explosion, tore through the bridge, silencing Captain Fagan forever. He had given his last order, made his last stand, and went down with his ship. 190 of his crew were lost with him, but their sacrifice worked. Captain Kronka had lost critical time. The convoy was no longer a neat, compact target. It had scattered widely. The German raider only managed to sink 5 of the merchant ships in the fading light. 32 ships, with their invaluable cargo and hundreds of lives, had escaped into the darkness. Even after the Jervis Bay vanished beneath the waves, the fight continued. One of the merchant ships, the Canadian freighter SS Beaverford, armed with a single small 4-inch gun, displayed an equal measure of courage. The Beaverford's captain, knowing his fate was sealed, deliberately broke radio silence and steered toward the Admiral Scheer, continuing to engage the colossal warship for another 4 hours, drawing the Germans' attention away from the last stragglers. The Beaverford was eventually sunk with all hands, but her heroic action cemented the success of the escape. Such was the magnificent, selfless courage of the merchant navy. The Battle of Convoy HX-84 was over. The ocean was left with debris, oil slicks, and the chilling silence that follow such destruction. Yet, amidst the wreckage, there were miracles of endurance. Against strict convoy orders to maintain formation and avoid contact, the captain of the neutral Swedish ship, SS Sturholm, Sven Olander, made a courageous humanitarian decision. He turned his vessel back toward the danger zone, defying naval protocol and risking an encounter with the German raider to search for survivors. For hours, his crew pulled exhausted, oil-covered men from the freezing water in lifeboats. 65 men from the Jervis Bay were saved that night. This act of bravery from a neutral party ensured Fagan's sacrifice was not total. News of Captain Fagan's extraordinary, selfless heroism reached a besieged Britain. In a nation desperately in need of inspiration, this impossible stand became a powerful symbol of hope and unwavering national resolve. For his valor in challenging hopeless odds and giving his life to save the many ships it was his duty to protect, Captain Edward Stephen Fogarty Fagan was posthumously awarded the Victoria Cross, the highest military honor in the British and Commonwealth forces. His name and the name of his ship would forever be synonymous with selfless, duty-bound courage. But the enduring legacy of Convoy HX-84 has one more layer of extraordinary determination. One of the merchant ships that had been struck by the Scheer, the tanker SS San Demetrio, was hit and abandoned by her crew, left burning. Days later, against all odds, her crew, having drifted in their lifeboats, sighted their own burning ship. In an unbelievable act of resilience and duty, they reboarded the damaged burning tanker, extinguished the fires, patched her hull, and incredibly, sailed her across the remainder of the Atlantic to the safety of a British port, delivering her invaluable cargo of 11,000 tons of aviation fuel. The Jervis Bay's sacrifice had provided the chance. The San Demetrio's crew ensured the mission's complete success. The actions of the Jervis Bay, the Beaverford, and the subsequent heroism of the San Demetrio's crew underscore a fundamental truth of the Battle of the Atlantic. It was fought not just by dedicated warships, but by converted liners and vulnerable freighters, and by ordinary men propelled by an unwavering sense of duty to deliver the goods. The Admiral Scheer continued its patrol, sinking more ships before eventually returning to Germany. But its early success against Convoy HX-84 was bought at a high price, the delay caused by Fagan. The sacrifice was immense, over 260 lives from the Jervis Bay and the Beaverford combined. Yet their courage ensured the survival of 32 ships and a critical mass of war materials that allowed Britain to fight another day and eventually to win the war. The story of HMS Jervis Bay and Convoy HX-84 is more than just a naval engagement. It is a timeless epic of courage against crushing odds, a testament to the selfless sacrifice that defined the Battle of the Atlantic. An impossible stand executed to perfection that saved the fate of a vital convoy, and delivered a desperately needed infusion of hope and supplies to a nation on the brink.